Today we're going to talk about identity, particularly losing it or gaining it, just a conversation. Because I feel like everyone talks about, or I should say I've met people who feel like they have lost their identity in their family, or they've lost their identity in marriage, or they've lost their identity, particular to me would be in motherhood. It could be in fatherhood. And so how do we navigate that? How do we navigate losing our identity in these things? And do we have to? So anyways, if you enjoy this episode, give it a thumbs up. And if you leave your name and number, I'll give you a call back.
I don't think, no. Are you kidding me? She doesn't get back to her best friends. She doesn't get back to her siblings
I'm doing better. I am doing better. That is a goal of mine this year. And I'm really doing a lot better.
You and I both, we've made a resolution. We've resolved to become better communicators with people in our life.
Yes. Not just talking on a podcast. Anyways, that said, we're grateful you're here. We're going to get this thing rolling.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
All right. Well, Katie, when I sat down here, I realized on my computer you had pulled up the definition of identity.
Just a subtle prompt.
Yeah. Well, I knew we were going to be talking about it, but I like how you were like, it's like you were like fact checking last minute. You're like, is this even identity? What is identity?
What are we even talking about?
What is this?
Well, I do think it's so important to define terms because I was scrolling a couple articles down from the Merriam-Webster definition.
Okay.
And then it's just people start saying whatever they want identity to be. Oh. And I'm like, wow, this is a lot of very different things. So let's address it from what Merriam-Webster says.
Sure. Which I'm assuming, well, this is the top one there. The fact of...
No, that's the Oxford Dictionary. I mean, that could count too.
Oh, sorry.
That could count.
I like that one better. It seems more
okay, let's
like
read
technical.
Both of them.
The fact of being who or what a person or thing is.
Yeah, so just the fact of being who a person is.
Yeah, and then the Merriam-Webster is 1, the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. And then you go down, and then it starts getting all weird and just very subjective. You know? Yeah.
And I think that's usually where the conversation goes with identity.
Yeah.
Is people start saying, basically, they're disgruntled with being confined to a definition of who they are. They feel like they're broader than how they are perceived, potentially. Because even some of those definitions down below are saying how a person is perceived. And I'm like, that's not necessarily your identity. People can perceive wrong all day long.
Yeah, the whole conversation around sexual identity has been so prevalent over the last decade. And so I go to that, and that's become so subjective to people's feelings and preferences. And it's not based in facts anymore. It's not based in biology and how God made them. And so I kind of like that first one, just the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. Is that kind of how we're going to speak about identity? Or
yeah, I think that's great.
Or are we going to get subjective too? We're just going to make it what we want it to be.
We're going to do all the above.
So it's funny because we started having this conversation following our last episode because we had talked about the problems with big families, and one of the things that I didn't get to was, we went through finance or, not getting enough quality time, one-on-one time with the parents and those things, standing out and being weird and stuff like that. But one of the things listed that I didn't get to, which was something that was reoccurring in these studies and then just in, kind of some op-ed type pieces was just being part of a clan, not having your own identity, being part of a group, just saying, hey, you're one of the fill in the last name. You're one of the Johnsons. You're one of the Votbergs, and again, that was certainly my experience growing up. Is that I was one of the Votbergs, and then beyond that, you start becoming known by particular. I guess because of your relation to particular siblings. So once my brother Joey was doing well in high school basketball, and he was having a good, career in high school basketball, that I started being known as Joby's little brother. Right. And then he went on and played college basketball, and still I was Joby's little brother. And then once my sister Liddy was, performing more and thriving, and excelling on the fiddle, she won the national fiddle championship. I was Liddy's younger brother. And then even this started happening with my younger siblings, depending on what they were excelling at any given time. It's like, oh, okay, you're Tucker's older brother. My brother started doing really well in golf. It's like, oh, you're Tucker and Dieter's, older brother. This just happened recently. One of my brothers is a cop, and I did a ride along with him, and everybody was like, "Oh, you're Dieter's big brother. You're Dieter's big brother." And so it's like I wasn't offended. I wasn't ever at any point in time as a child up to being an adult and going on a ride along just like a week and a half ago or I guess it was a few weeks ago now, but with my little brother, I wasn't offended. I didn't say, no, I'm not Dieter's big brother. I am Elisha Peter Vogtberg, and I am an individual. That never once crossed my mind, even when I was known as Joby's little brother or Joe's, son. And so, anyways, I guess I affirm that what these studies show to be a negative thing. I affirm that was the case, but I totally disagree with it being a negative thing.
I think that's interesting how you took that and how you addressed that, because I think you're so right. Coming down to that perception, you were, okay, going back real quick to the definition. It doesn't change who you are, the fact of who you are, regardless of how you're perceived. So I think we need to not be so sensitive maybe if someone's saying, oh, I'm perceiving you as, in this situation, you're so-and-so's sibling, and that's how I'm viewing you. And it doesn't change who you are. And I think sometimes that happens in marriage, or it can happen in motherhood, where someone's perceiving us, oh, you have children. I'm going to perceive you as a mother. And yes, you are an individual. You have a lot of different skills and talents and abilities, but someone's just relating a fact about you. And it's the same thing with marriage, where someone will relate a fact about who you are. Oh, you're Elisha's wife. I think this can be a beautiful thing when you're really proud of the family members that you're a part of. Like Elisha was mentioning, anytime you're referenced with one of your siblings,
the best.
Like your identity's tied to them, it's awesome. And I think that is a thing that as we're raising our children, we could have them see as a incredible blessing, which is, all these people are on your team and you get to be a part of this family. And I think I grew up thinking that was so cool. And so anytime now, like when I'm referenced as Caroline's sister or Kyla's sister, or Kelsey, the VMA piano teacher's sister, whatever the case may be, or Baylor's sister, I'm always so proud of those siblings. And I want to be connected to them. I want my identity to be tied to them. And so instead of seeing it as a negative thing that my identity's tied to them, it can be a really cool thing where it's like, hey, it makes you look even better than you are.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? I feel that way whenever someone's like, oh, you're Elisha's wife. I'm like, yeah, it's the coolest thing that I get to be. And I'm honestly so honored to be Elisha's wife. People like me more because I'm his wife.
Right.
And it's just fantastic. Or I'm Leon, Lucy, Lewis, Lawrence, Lionel, and Lyman's mother. Like, I'm really proud of my children. When people meet them, I'm so happy my identity is tied to them. So I think that if we really work on the relationships around us, this can be, or just are grateful for the ones that God's given us, because honestly, I'm just a recipient of the relationships around me for the most part. It can be a net win.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. And it's funny because I mentioned a couple of my siblings, I think I mentioned Joby, Liddy, Tucker and Dieter. But this has happened with each one of my siblings.
I know. I didn't.
At some point.
It's hard when you have a lot of siblings.
Right.
Like Cordy, Kinsey, Bentley.
Right. And it's happened where, you're Bryce's brother,
Chloe,
you're,
Kitty.
and I can go through all my siblings. And every time, without fail, I'm always so proud to say, yeah, that's exactly who I am. I'm Rudy's older brother. I'm Vance's. And this happened. We were on the East Coast a couple months back speaking at the Wellness Collective. And somebody comes up to our table and they go, "Are you Rudy's brother?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? I was the guy that was here speaking, like that wasn't my attitude."
Rudy's my brother.
Yeah, Rudy's no. Like, Rudy's the best, and they start going off on Rudy. I'm like, no way over here across the country. They want to connect with me because of my association to my youngest brother, and this is actually also carried over into in-laws as well. And Jeremy Pryor talks about this with family teams. It is really fun to start viewing your family as a team and as really just this, a group that is that you're associating with. You're like, those are my people. And this definitely is the case with in-laws. And this, it's so bizarre. Here, there's like a co-working space in Coeur d'Alene that I was like a member at for a couple of years. I'm not a member there anymore, but I still go down there a lot and just like mooch off the internet. But still, it's funny. I joined there about the same time as, no. So I had been down in that area for like a year and a half. We had lived here. And then our brother-in-law, Adam Van Wingerden, came and he moved to Coeur d'Alene for just a few months, maybe 5 or 6 months. And he was down there at the co-working space. And even though I had been here 2 years before him, he knew, everybody way before I did and was connected with them. And I am still, to this day, even though he left like 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, I'm known as Adam Van Wingerden's brother-in-law. Right. And I'm so proud of it. Like, he's just such a connector and he's so well spoken. I'm so grateful to be associated with him. Even though this is technically my town now, my hometown, he's not even from here. It's like I've been here way longer. I've even known a lot of these people a lot longer than he knew them. And yet they still know me as Adam Van Winger and his brother. And to me, that's great.
Yeah, it's awesome. So anyways, instead of seeing it as a negative thing, you can see it as a positive. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, how this is typically meant is in a big family, for instance, the downside is you're kind of lost in the muddle and you don't really develop a sense of who you are as a person with your own thoughts, your own beliefs, where things don't really take root, I feel like, in your own life. And I think that this can be a character flaw. I think that this can also just, honestly, it really comes down to the child as an individual owning their own life at a certain point. I think people can point to like, oh, I'm just one of the mix and I'm just lost here in the muddle of being a Johnson or whatever the case may be. But at a certain point, you have to take responsibility for your own life. It's not your parents' responsibility or your siblings' responsibility to give you this, 3-foot beauty space within to sink down your roots and become your own person. That's really on each person. And that can happen in a family of 2 children. It can also happen in a family of 10, where you just never really develop your own thoughts and beliefs and standards and, stake who you are as a person for yourself.
I agree. And so even though we talked about all the pros and how awesome it is to be associated with various people and be known as, a relative of them, the fact is that you want each one of your children, and same goes because we're going to talk about marriage as well. Because I feel like this actually gets brought up. I don't know if it gets brought up more, but I feel like I hear it more in the context of marriage and parenting. I lost my identity when I got married. I lost my identity when I became a parent. I don't even know who I am anymore. I'm just taking care of kids all the time. Do I even have my own set of, value that I'm bringing to the world? And so we'll get to that. But I think when it comes to our children and ensuring that they are confident in their faith, you use the term ownership, and I've kind of moved away from that, even though, Jocko wrote a great book, Extreme Ownership. I think as Christians, we need extreme stewardship because our lives are not our own. We've been bought at a price, and we are to glorify God, therefore, in these bodies. And I do think stewardship actually brings a far more sobering perspective to the things. When you think you own your life, when you own your body, you own your identity, then who's to say that you can't do something with it, right? Who's to say that you can't be lazy? Who's to say that you're supposed to work heartily? It's like if you just answer to yourself, then there is no right or wrong. You're like, you get to choose what's right or wrong, but we know that's not the reality. We answer to God, and as Christians, we've been purchased by God. We are now His. We've been adopted, and we do answer to Him for how we steward our lives and the gifts and the opportunities He's given us. And so, with all that said, I think it is crucial that our children know what they believe and why they believe it, and that they have the opportunity to express that for themselves, and they have the opportunity to even have that challenged, whether that's in the context of the home or if it's outside of the home, kind of getting out there and mixing it up in the public sphere with peers or with people that are older or younger than them, and having, feeling some pushback on some of their beliefs. I want that to happen while my children are in the home, because we know it's going to happen. Right? That is inevitable as Christians. We're going to get pushback on our beliefs, and there's going to be opposition to our beliefs and to our values. And so if we're able to kind of facilitate our children getting those reps in when they're still in the safe, they can still retreat home. And I can remember genuinely feeling that at times, like I was 15, 16, 17 years of age, being out and, whether I was at a basketball tournament with my basketball team, and I'd travel with one of the other, families, and the things they'd talk about were contrary to what I believed. And I would try to share what I believed, and it was so clunky and I couldn't defend it. And I'd get grouped up, they'd gang up on me, and I'd be like, okay, whatever, forget it. Let's just go play basketball. Or maybe it would be at fiddle contests where I'm around people that are of just conflicting worldviews, and I'd get my reps in, and I'd usually fall on my face, and it wouldn't be good. And I would just, sum it all up and be like, well, Jesus loves you. That would be like my final, parting words. And I'll be like, I did so bad with that. I failed, but then I felt like I could go home and kind of regroup, be like, okay, well, I've got the support and the security and the safety of my parents and of my home. And I want to provide that home to our children, and then my children with the opportunity to discover their ability to articulate their faith and know what they believe and why they believe it.
Like we talked about with all the dangers of big families or the problems with big families episode that we just did, it can be a myth. There can be an upside to all of them. And also, if we aren't intentional, there can be a downside to all of them. And they can be real problems. And I think of that when it comes to this identity concept. I think there can be a real enabling that happens in a family because you do develop your own culture, and it's really cool. But then also you can really have, people can really overlook maybe deficiencies in your character or whatever the case may be, because you are such a unit, or people pick up slack where you've slacked off, or you can become a part to a puzzle. And then when you are a piece that's out of that puzzle, you kind of are floundering. Yeah. You don't quite know what to do.
And you're just like this weird looking shape, a puzzle piece outside of the puzzle.
Yeah. You're like, what's your problem, man?
Yeah.
So I do think something that was really helpful and that we want to encourage all of our children in is to go out on their own and to develop on their own. And I think that that's a big, important piece is we want our kids to have to stand on their own 2 feet and defend their own faith and not have, the sibling that's always really good at talking through stuff, just speak for them, right? Or the kid that's always really good at leadership, just take over. We want to give all our children leadership responsibilities. We want to give all of them, I don't know, what else? Like have them speak for themselves, have them not hide behind other siblings or be covered by other siblings or buried by other siblings. And so I do think that that's something that can happen really in any family where there's siblings, because you do kind of figure out what each other's strengths and weaknesses are, and then you cover for each other. And that could feel cool for a while. And then also when you're on your own, you can feel a little lost. And so we want each of our boys to be leaders of their own families. We want each one of our only daughter, actually, Lucille, to be confident on her own without all her brothers around, be able to speak for herself. And so I do think that that's a real thing that in our family we want to encourage. And I know that that was really big for you, even moving out of your hometown was just, I don't know, just... Yeah. Well, and Elisha on his own.
Yeah, and even prior to that, it was doing ventures on my own. I think selling Christmas trees was crucial to growing in confidence. Yeah. I think even doing music projects outside of the family band was really helpful to my development of to my development. And I don't think it's wrong if there are those natural giftings that are expressed in a home, right? Like it's good that you're going to have some people that are going to be more outspoken. You're going to have some people that are more subtle, that are more relational. They know how to kind of be quiet and be backstage people. The family is going to function the way that it functions, and that's a very beautiful thing. But you don't want that to keep your children from developing, because you want them to be able to thrive outside the family. Because I think of both sides of our families. Even going to your mom's family, all of the Johnstons, all great communicators. You give them a mic, they can do well. But when it's a family gathering, it's like Uncle Mark or Uncle Bruce is going to have the mic. There's a total like default that takes place all these decades later, right? Even although all of them have developed that skill.
Yeah, some of them are in their 70s.
Yeah. And it's like,
crazy.
It is crazy, but and it's great, right? All the other siblings have obviously developed and they're high functioning individuals. Same with the Votbergs. I feel like all my siblings are great communicators. They're great speakers. But then we do our family concerts, and we all fall into our roles that we were in for 20, 25 years performing. And so it can be a really cool thing. And it's the same thing with the Johnsons, right? They're all amazing communicators and speakers, but then it's like, well, your dad will probably be the guy, that's kind of going to be the one running the show and being the MC.
With his siblings.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think you can really leverage everyone's strengths and enjoy that and benefit from it, but then don't stop there. Go outside, because hopefully the other kids are going to be leading teams in their workplace, or other people are going to be leading, ministries, or they're going to be leading their homes, Lord willing. And that is a leadership position. And that's something that we talk a lot about in the Growth Initiative, is how, for some reason, business books, leaders in organizations, they'll read business books or they'll read leadership development books, and we know how that applies, but then we don't view ourselves as leaders when we are husbands and fathers, even though we are actually leading a far more influential institution and organization than any other institution and organization. So every man that is a husband and a father is a leader. He needs to be leading well. And so you want to give those leadership skills to each and every one of your children, regardless of how the flow is at home. Okay, real quick. If you're looking for music lessons for your family, piano lessons, guitar lessons, fiddle lessons, ukulele lessons, mandolin lessons, you can subscribe to Votberg Music Academy and get lessons for the whole family. Subscribe to the piano course, one subscription, get you piano lessons for the whole family. Subscribe to guitar, that gets you guitar lessons for the whole family. We'll link it below. You get a special discount, and you can see that below by listening to our podcast. That's how you get the discount. Go check it out.
Yeah, now I did have a unique experience growing up in our big family, because I never felt like I lost my identity in the family. Like I was just one of the Johnsons. And I think a big reason for that was because I was the eldest. And so I felt like I was right there with my parents creating our family culture, and I think as a result of that, I never felt buried, obviously. I was probably doing the burying. I think some of my other younger siblings, it's been really huge for them and very confidence-inducing to go out on their own, to go to a Bible college for a period of time, or to go to a camp for a period of time and be valued outside of the family system for things that maybe were taken for granted within the family. And we're like, oh yeah, Kimmy's really good at this, Chloe's really good at that. And we just assumed they were that way. But then when they went outside of the home, they really were validated for those things that maybe we were taking for granted in our home. And so I think that those are things that we really want to encourage our children in, because I think it will develop their weaknesses more when they're on their own in due time. It doesn't need to be when they're 8. And it will also maybe help them wake up to the real world too, if they're a little bit more like me and felt like they had it all together because you were the top dog in the little family. And then you go outside on your own, and Elisha's like, really, I was in my family culture till I got married. I never did anything on my own. So Elisha was the one who had to be like, okay, you can't say things like that. Or like, I think you really helped me grow in my You're very affirming, but also very gracious and helping me grow with weaknesses that were, again, really forgiven and overlooked in my own family. So this can be good for weaknesses, needing to be, knock the edges off. And it could also be great for building confidence when you do have strengths that are being overlooked. So both sides of the coin, it's helpful for people to go outside their family, I think, and establish that identity.
Yeah, I agree. And in regards to marriage, or if you want to move to that, if you're cool doing that.
Let's go to marriage.
Yeah, I think I've probably had moments where I'm like, what is even happening? Who am I? What is going on right now? Well, I'm guessing not as much as some people, because I always wanted to be a father. Like, I know a lot of people want to be a father, but that was always, it was just always a part of my planning. And so when I would look at career opportunities, or where I would move to, or schools to go to, like being a husband and a father they were like the first things I would consider, right? It was just kind of like, okay, is this going to better my opportunity to meet my wife and to start a family? Or is it going to postpone that, and hinder that? And so I think that it's like, once I was a father, I was like, awesome. I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to be this. That said, when it comes to like the activities that you can find yourself being kept busy with as a father or as a parent, I think that might be more what people are referring to, where it's like, man, all I do is, I go and I work, and then I, change diapers, and then I, clean up the kids, and then, we pray, and then we go to bed, and it's just like day in and day out. Like, do I even have my own hobbies? Do I even have my own interests? Am I pursuing things just for the sake of my own, pleasure, or things that I get to enjoy for leisure? I've definitely been in seasons like that where even though I would have never pout about it or say that, because I get that the work that I'm doing, I think, is a high calling, but I would certainly question, like, wow, is this everything that I am right now? Like, are these activities? And I think, again, it's so and this is why it's so critical to have these conversations, I think, with the person that you marry, is you need to align on a value system. Like, say that is all you are doing, which it never is, but that's sometimes there's seasons where that's what it feels like. You're like, what worthy work, right? It is such worthy work to be pouring into your children, to be pouring into your marriage. And so, and again, we didn't even say this, so I'm going to back up just a click. Okay. I don't want to assume that we always believe this or that our listeners believe it, but that identity being found in Christ. And again, that was said at every young adult small group and every high school group I went to my entire life. And yet it's becoming more and more profound to me when you think more and more about even that definition. Like, this is who I am and what I am. I am a Christian. I am blood bought. I am in the household of God. It behooves him to call me his brethren. We get to be joint heirs together with Christ. We get to reign with him. We've been given, we're a peculiar people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, set forth to proclaim the glory of him that's called us out of darkness and into his marvelous light. There are so many identity verses in the New Testament where it just states, this is who you are now. Okay, the old man is dead. You're now a new creation in Christ. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. And you're like, well, that is who I am and what I am. So that, in everything that we're talking about, we want our children to know that and believe that, and we want to believe that as spouses. But I think oftentimes we forget that person does things, right? The royal priesthood that we now are does things. The blood-bought saint does things. And so it's not wrong to think that my activities will have something to do with my identity. Because, as I said, all those titles we've been given, none of those people just sit on their hands, right? Navel gazing is not really a part of those job descriptions, though some like to think that it is. And so activities are going to be attached to those identities. And so I do think it is worth questioning what our activities are and if they are aligned with the identity of being a Christian, and then the identity that in being a Christian we're called to as spouses, a husband or a wife, and then that identity as a parent. All of those identities are going to require action and activities, and so it should be considered.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because really all these, we're discussing like secondary identities.
Right.
They're all encapsulated in the first one.
Yeah. Encapsulated or like kind of downstream. Yeah. Like flow
downstream.
from. Yeah.
There you go. But okay, just to kind of break these apart a little bit, because I hear them talked about in different ways. I hear people losing their identity in marriage, and I also hear them losing their identity in parenthood. And they kind of go together because they're both family. But I think that people will lose their identity in marriage, or how I hear this spoken about, is like, okay, well, I was so trying to please my spouse that I couldn't really remember what my own opinions were, what my own thoughts were, what my own hobbies were, because I just kind of became so immersed in what my spouse was doing or what they thought. And I think there's a beautiful side to this, obviously getting very into what your spouse is into. I think more couples can learn from that if you become that immersed in who your spouse is and what they enjoy. But also what makes you appealing in a marriage is interest. And there's no interest if you're a blob that doesn't have your own like opinions, thoughts, interests. That's what makes you an interesting person, is bringing something to the table, personality-wise, discussion-wise, learning-wise. And so I do think that it's really important and healthy to be able to, like, one thing I love about Elisha is we can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And that's not just because we both like to hear ourselves talk. I think it's because I just find him so interesting. You're always bringing home, Elisha, like new ideas, either you've listened to, new people you've talked to that have brought up new concepts, books you've read where there's new concepts, podcasts you've listened to, like things the Lord is showing you in his word. There's just so many, there's always new discussion with Elisha, and we don't always agree. I love when we do, and I don't think it's a bad thing to agree as much as you can with your spouse. But I think that that's something that I've never experienced in marriage, I think because I find life so interesting. I love to learn on my own, and I love to bring everything that I'm learning to Elisha. And so I don't really understand when people say, oh, I feel like I've lost myself in marriage. I don't think this means you need to like go out and like, I think people have midlife crises maybe when they say like, I've lost myself in marriage. It's like, I need to go out and I don't know, like,
get a tattoo.
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah. And I'm kind of like, how do you get to that point? I guess, because I feel like my life as a person, like I'm Katie in every way. I just get to share all my favorite things with Elisha, and like my highs and my lows and my emotions and life.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really beautiful. So I can't understand, I guess, that getting like losing your identity in marriage. I just feel like I have more fun being who I am in marriage.
Yeah. We know that the pursuit of pleasing ourselves is a very dark hole that fills you, that leaves you feeling unsatisfied. It leads to discouragement, and just you are not going to be fulfilled in the pursuit of satisfying or pleasing yourself. And I think a lot of this can stem from that, where you think, well, who am I? How can I fully express the real me, the true me? It just leads to so much self-consuming thoughts. I'm gonna struggle here, I think, for the remainder of this episode, speaking words that make sense.
A little late, folks.
And so I don't think it's wrong to find yourself so caught up in an outward mission that's not yourself, right? We do, again, going back to our primary identity, I think that's actually what Bill Rapier talks about, is having your primary identity. So like first and foremost, I'm a Christian, then I'm a husband, then I'm a father, then, so on and so forth. And so if your primary identity is being a Christian, again, that's not for the purpose of self-expression and self-fulfillment. There is a purpose and there's a mission that Christians have been given, right? To whether it's the Great Commission or going back to that verse that I already mentioned from Is that First Peter or Second Peter, that you are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, set forth to proclaim the glory. But so we're given that identity piece, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, and then we're given the purpose of that identity, or the mission, so to speak, set forth to proclaim the glory of Him that's called us out of darkness and into His marvelous light. Well, all of those things are somebody else. Like, that's all outward from us. All those things are that he just talked about, and so if that primary identity requires you to look outside of yourself into God's calling for the church and His mission for the church, then the next one down, marriage, is probably going to do the same thing as well. Like, this marriage is actually more valuable than me by myself. Like, this marriage, if you kind of like almost remove it from yourself, like if you were to remove God's mission and like put it out on a table and be like, okay, that's the mission. Great. I'm glad I have that perspective. I'm going to go dive in and be a part of that mission. And then you have your marriage and it's on a table and you're like, oh, awesome. God, it instituted this into the world and it's valuable and it brings Him great glory. Let's work on this thing, and you, I know it doesn't always work like that, and you don't want to get like, like all technical with it, but it can be helpful. I think when you step outside of yourself and you kind of look at marriage, you're like, okay, we're going to work on the marriage, and the same thing with the family and the home, and you kind of remove yourself from it, meaning you're viewing it like you're trying to view it removed. You're like, okay, is this good for our marriage? Is this good for the family? Is this good for the church? I think there's actually tons of purpose and fulfillment in approaching things that way. And you actually are far happier when you are not just looking inwardly and saying, well, but what's my point in this? What's my role in the church? What's my role in this marriage? Because I don't know what you're looking for, a badge, or you're looking for, accolades or a pat on the back. And that's just kind of petty. I feel like at that point, it's like the creator of the universe, the King of Kings, has brought you into this family. He's the hero. We all know He's the hero, and He's the author of the story, and He's going to be the one that finishes His story. What an honor to be along on the journey. And so getting caught up in like, well, am I really expressing my full, giftings, in the context of the church? It's like, well, it's actually easier to tell whether or not you're doing that if you remove yourself from it and you just kind of listen to what other people say, meaning, hey, this is the need of the body. This is the need in our home and in the marriage.
I just think it's funny how we both just described this, because I sound very hedonistic and you sound very altruistic over there. Like, what does the family need? What does the marriage need? Sacrifice yourself.
I've spent far too many years just in my own head thinking like, what do I feel? How do I feel about that? What do I think about that? How does that make me, when you say that, it makes me feel like this. I wonder why. No, are you kidding me?
I mean,
I've spent way too much time doing that.
That's healthy to be able to communicate.
I think it's nice to be aware of it, but then to not put too much emphasis on it.
So
or to like draw truth from it. I think people try to draw truth from it. It's like, when you say this, it makes me feel like this, therefore we all know what truth is. So
do you feel like you've lost your identity in your marriage?
No, boy, Katie,
he does.
Lost my identity in marriage. I feel like I'm happier than I've ever been in my entire life. And so I'm not real concerned with my identity, I guess. It's like if you were to ask me, how's your, are you feeling fulfilled in your work? Yeah. Are you enjoying the people you're around? Yeah. It's like, are you, satisfied sexually? Yeah, definitely. Do you find great, do you feel like you're adding value to the home or to the church? I think all those things because I don't think about those things. I feel that like I'm doing all those things because I don't spend a ton of time thinking about it.
Okay. That was not satisfying. Really?
You don't believe me?
No, I believe all those things. I guess like in this context of when people say, though, they lose their self in a marriage, do you feel like you're more yourself outside of the marriage?
No.
Okay, because I think that's usually what people mean.
How about I'll say
it's like I lost who I was when I became married. I have to kind of put these parts of me like totally aside or forget they existed or whatever for the sake of the marriage and the sake of the family.
I think people have an elevated view of their former self. And I think that, maybe I've got an elevated view of my current self. I don't know. But I feel like this is the best version of me, is being a husband, being a father, pouring into my children. And to get, I guess, very minute with it, I still think that when those tasks that get, I guess, categorized as like these menial, busy work tasks, whether it's cleaning up after the kids, rinsing off our, 18-month-old after he eats a dinner, he's just a mess, or changing diapers. And it's not that work's fun, but when I get frustrated with it, I still do think back to before I was married, and I'm like, I never did anything this valuable. I'm actually stewarding a soul that God's blessed me with through marriage. And so never once do I look back and I'm like, oh man, I had so I feel like the best version of me is married and a father.
Yeah, I feel like this might be a bad time to ask because we are in a postpartum season, so Elisha's home doing a lot more stuff on top of work to help take care of me and healing and all that. But yeah, that's good.
What about you? Do you feel like you've lost your identity?
No, I just said I don't feel like I did at all. I feel like I've become a better person of myself. But
a better person of yourself, yeah?
Yeah, a better person of myself. But I feel like you didn't give me like a yes or a no. You like...
Well, ask it again, because I just don't know how much time we're supposed to spend dwelling on our identity as Christians. It's like we're told our identity in the New Testament numerous times as being, it's like we're Christians, and then we're given these titles of, that then becomes a part of our identity of husband. But the reason we value the title of husband is because our primary identity is a Christian. Like the reason the world or the reason secular people or pagan people don't value the term husband is because they're not Christians in the first place. So they're not going to value, they can't value that primary identity. In the sense, the same reason they don't value children is because they're not Christians in the first place. And so I think Christians can have secular thinking in these areas because of how much of that ideology has crept into the church. And so I think somebody can call themselves a Christian and truly be a Christian, but then have wrong thinking around what marriage is and how valuable of a position that is, and what parenting, what being a parent, what being a father is, and how valuable of a position that is. I think we really undervalue these collectively as a church because of the secular influence in the church. And so,
yes. And
I guess it's just, what I'm saying is it's like, we don't have a hard time point to like something that culture or society would deem valuable, whether it's like on a pop culture level and you say, oh, well, they're a billionaire, or they started this company that is this huge and it impacts the world and it gives whatever internet to the whole world, to every unreached place, Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos. Or you look to the sports arena and you're like, oh, Michael Jordan or whoever, Tiger Woods or whatever, Tom Brady. And you're like, they of course that is a worthy title that they have fought for. But if you have a Christian worldview, I think you actually view the title of husband and as father. And I know this sounds cheesy, but those are they are a superior title to any of those things I just listed. Nice, Lyman. And so if you believe that, I think it is a belief thing. You don't value the title of mother or a father high enough if you feel like you're having an identity crisis.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I agree with you. And I also think, I guess what I'm saying is, from a straight up secular standpoint though, like, I don't just value children because the Bible tells me to value children. I genuinely enjoy being a mother so much that I would enjoy that outside of my faith. Now, there's a lot more purpose behind it and fulfillment behind it because of God's word. But I do think that his blessings of children are the rain falls on the just and the unjust. I think it's a blessing for people who are secular that choose to have children and pour into them. And there is joy that the world misses out on because they say no to God's value system. And I think of that with marriage. I think there's so much blessing in marriage, and it's what I enjoy more. I'm just reading this book. It's called 4,000 Weeks, and it's how we only have 4,000 weeks to live. And this is not a Christian book at all, actually. And he talks about how marriage and the limitations of marriage actually lead to more happiness statistically. And that's for secular or non-secular people. And so I think of that in terms of enjoyment or whatever. Yes, at a baseline, I value these things because Scripture says to value them. From a personal fulfillment and enjoyment level.
Experiential.
Yeah, now that doesn't have to line up. It doesn't make God's word any less true if my experience doesn't line up with it that day. But from an experiential standpoint, I experience personally more joy and more fulfillment in being a wife and in being a mother than I did outside of that.
Yes.
Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, if that's what you're asking me then too, then yes, I'm experiencing more joy in marriage and in parenting than I did outside of marriage. But that is interesting that you say, you said something along the lines of you would enjoy it outside of your faith. Like if you didn't have a Christian faith,
I still want to be a mother.
And that's a weird hypothetical because it's like our faith shapes how we view everything.
Yes.
But you are right in saying that, using that verse, the rain falls on the just and the unjust. These are blessings that God has just given to the world, to his creation. And like marriage is a gift to be experienced by his creation, and children are a gift to be experienced. And it is bizarre how one of the most debilitating things is thinking you can be anything, right? Like if you think you can do anything, then you are very unhappy and unsatisfied and probably ineffective as well. And that concept of once you forsake all others and cling to your spouse, right? And you're joined to your spouse, there's so much joy in that. You're like, oh, thank goodness. And I think the same thing occurs when you have children and you're forsaking a lot of things because of the duty and responsibility that you now have to this child. And there's so much life in that. And there's so much fulfillment and freedom within those boundaries, within saying no. And I think that's a lie that a lot of people bring into marriage is thinking like, oh, well, I could do so much with my life if it weren't for these children, which again, you can't. Like there's anybody that's done really well at anything has said no to everything except for that one thing, right? Which is really bizarre. So they've done very little, actually, but they've done a lot with that one thing. Does that make sense? So they've not done very many things. They've done one thing and done a lot with it. And I really think that it's incumbent upon us as parents to have that perspective with our family and our children, and to be like, I'm going to do one or two things really well. Like that is what I'm going to be about. And anyways.
And then, so separating out identity from marriage and then going to identity as a mother, I think what's interesting is picturing, kind of having a fixed mindset with who we were as a single person was the peak of who we were meant to be. And so my identity is different now as a mom of 6 kids than it was when I was 19, 20 years old. That was not my peak identity, and now I'm just trying to recreate that reality in my life. The Lord has continued to reshape my identity within the things that I do and grow who I am and change my capabilities and grow my capabilities. And that will continue. Like my identity right now as a mom of 6 kids will be different when they're all in their teens. It will be different again when I'm a grandmother. I'm not trying to go back to when I was a single person and saying, well, that is what do they call it when they do those case studies? And then that's the group that everything's compared against.
The study group or no.
Man, you guys are going to be like, no, this is so obvious.
That is compared against?
Yeah, like the control group.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that is not the control. And then everything other than that is
like the moving variables.
Yeah, or has
like
all these
outside
variables that are trying to get back to that control group. that's not the case at all. And so I think we need to change our perspective when it goes, oh, I'm losing my identity in motherhood. It's like, no, your identity is changing and it's growing, and it should be growing in positive ways. And yes, we can still have those hobbies and those interests. And I think it's healthy to bring those things in that we had as single people into our lives. Some of them might serve us in this season. Some of them might not and just need to be left. Some of them we're going to need to get creative on how to bring hobbies or interests that we had before into this current season and do it a little differently. But it's not to say that that was the ideal. And I think that's the same thing with even the concept of, I think this shows up a lot with women. I think it can show up with, oh, I want to get my body back or whatever, just as if like a certain age was the ideal stage of womanhood, instead of being like, oh, well, it can just be different and it could be better. Different can be better. Yep. And so having that perspective, I guess, that different can be better and being open to changing and growing, because that's just going to continue on. It can be a progression higher and a progression forward, not like, okay, now we're burdened with all these things that are holding us back from who we were as a single person.
Wow. Yeah, you're so right. I mean, that's that, what the Huxley book, the Aldous Huxley book, like where everybody's the same age, A Brave New World or whatever. It's like,
that is a very dark book.
It is.
I was very disturbed.
And that's a premise in that, is it like people are ageless and timeless and they just kind of like disappear. And it's a twisted, obviously dystopian existence. And yet people act like they want that, where they can't view, like your body's going to change through having children. And that's a beautiful thing. Like it's a good thing. And I think we should celebrate that and look and elevate that into the place that it should be elevated to.
And it can be. I'm not saying that we have to say that something that's like not attractive is the most beautiful thing in the world. I'm not saying like, oh, just pretend that, something is an ideal where everyone knows it's not. Okay. There's reality that we're up against.
Yeah, well, there's health.
There's
health
so
is
many
more
different
objective.
things. Yeah, but it's not to say that you can't get better with age. Elisha has.
No, you have gotten way better than me.
Definitely has.
Yeah. What I was trying to say, and because I feel like I rambled a bunch in this episode. What I was trying to say in like, okay, if you remove yourself from the marriage, from your family, from the church, and you're like, what would actually benefit this? I think we are so adaptable as humans. We can make what would benefit our home something that we really enjoy and that we like doing. I think we do this all the time. And so when we resort back to like, well, I know I like, leading women's groups and going out with the girls, or I'm just speaking from a woman's perspective, not a guy's perspective, or as a guy, it's like, man, I know that like the only way I have fun is, going out with the guys or going to games or watching football. It's like, that's not how humans are. We are very adaptable. And so if you're able to remove yourself, be like, it's actually more beneficial for me if I do these things. Well, I'm going to learn to enjoy those things. You still don't like that? No.
Well, I don't know if I just love that you're like having to like, because I agree with you. And I feel like we agree on this point because we've done this like intentionally. It's kind of like how I don't like that passage in scripture. When you use it, like you need to lay down your life for your wife. I'm like, okay, I get that that's a reality. Don't describe being married to me as you dying every day. You know what I mean? That's just kind of depressing.
I never do. I always do it to annoy you.
You do because you know what I'm saying? Yep. So I feel like it's kind of that concept like, oh, I can learn to enjoy marriage, or I can learn.
No, I'm not
to
talking about marriage.
family.
I'm talking like, okay, maybe I probably can't talk myself out of this one. Yeah. So
I've already been offended.
I know.
We can't go back.
I know. It happened like 25 minutes ago. I was like, dang it, I said the wrong thing.
Because you keep clarifying and it's not helpful.
I love marriage more than I ever have. Even if I were like a selfish, hedonistic, secular person, I would be like, this is the best thing in the world. Is that
I know
better?
you love me, and I know that you love our marriage. But you're a lot more. I'm a lot more simple in the way that I see things, and I think you are a lot more like analytical. And it's not just a simple yes or no. It's like no, like you think through things, and I like that about you. So that's good. And I'm just like, yeah, it's great, or check the box. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And you give a much more nuanced answer. So
That's why that whole
I like it.
1 to 10 is always a good question, right? Scale of 1 to 10, how are we doing in marriage?
Yes.
That's, we can ask each other that offline. So.
Honestly, I would say like 8 or 9 right now.
Yeah, me too.
I love our marriage.
Me too. And so
Yes.
you should have asked
Alicia's
me that.
learning to love our marriage.
No, exactly.
Over
When I
there.
remove myself from our marriage, I love it. No, I'm joking. I'm joking, Katie.
What?
I'm totally
Okay, it's dropping lower.
I'm teasing.
We're at a 3.
Yeah, folks, before things get any worse, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.